Today we're going to talk about what Republicans are trying to get in exchange for holding the debt ceiling hostage, and I interview former Republican consultant and writer at The Bulwark, Tim Miller, about the ever-growing list of George Santos lies, where a so-called moderate Republican like him fits into politics now, and what he expects to see from the impending Trump-DeSantis feud. I'm Brian Tyler Cohen, and you're watching No Lie. So this past week, the U.S. officially hit its debt limit. Now, in last week's video podcast episode, I warned about what's at stake if the U.S. defaults, which is effectively the full faith and credit of the United States, domestic and global markets, the stability of the U.S. dollar. Now, even though we hit our limit, the Treasury Department's now using what it's calling extraordinary measures to meet its financial obligations. But that only lasts a limited amount of time, so that'll get us to roughly June. And if the debt ceiling isn't raised by then, we'll see our economy crater and the dollar's position as the world's reserve currency put at risk. So fun stuff. So the solution here, as I've explained in the past, is a clean bill raising the debt ceiling. Republicans won't do that because they see this as their opportunity to hold the economy hostage in exchange for concessions. And in terms of what those concessions are, we don't know all of them yet because Kevin McCarthy won't reveal all of what he promised the hostage takers in exchange for their speaker votes, but we're slowly starting to learn what some of them are, and they are insane. Now, we already know that they want to take an axe to popular programs like Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, which they don't like because those programs serve the working class and not the donor class. And so even though you've spent your entire lives paying into those programs and trying to earn those earned benefits, Republicans want them privatized because, I don't know, no enterprise is valid unless there's a CEO behind it giving you the absolute bare minimum. But this week, we also found out that they're pushing for the elimination of the IRS, all personal and corporate income taxes, the inheritance tax, the payroll tax, and all of that would be replaced by a 30% national sales tax. Now, that's called the Fair Tax Act. It is a gift to the wealthy. It's like Christmas and their birthdays and the 4th of July all wrapped into one. So instead of collecting income tax commensurate with your income, which for the wealthy is a lot, instead, we'll slap a flat tax on all items, which means every time you want to buy a shirt, a meal, a roll of toilet paper, it'll cost you 30% more. And so it's not the wealthy being taxed on their income, which is disproportionately higher than everyone else's. It is everyone else, the working class, who's going to carry the brunt of the tax burden. Like, think about it. It's not like someone making $100 million a year is buying lunches that cost 1,000 times more than someone making $100,000 a year. So our tax revenue is going to plummet, which means less funding for programs that people rely on to survive, which means people pay out of their own pockets and have less disposable income, which means less spending in the economy, and that'll contract our economy. And because we'll have less tax revenue at the federal level, that means our deficit gets worse, which means it's harder to shrink our national debt, which is that thing that Republicans pretend to care about, even though all of their actual policies make it worse. Like, there is no planet on which the elimination of all income and corporate taxes being replaced by a flat sales tax does anything other than drive our deficit through the roof. Here's the most amazing part. Consider the fact that we just finished an election cycle where the only thing the GOP ran on was high costs and inflation. And now that they have power in the House, the way they want to exercise that power is to tax everything 30% higher. Every time you open your wallet, you're incurring a 30% premium. Some low earners don't even incur an income tax, but now they get hit with paying more tax on everything. Again, the only people who win here are the ultra rich, and it is the working poor who would get slammed. All this coming from the same people currently cosplaying as the voice of the working man and following on the price of eggs like it's the stock market on Black Friday. Like, the gap between what these people say and what they actually do is big enough to fly a plane through. So what do we do? What's the solution here? Well, Hawaii Senator Brian Schatz summed it up pretty perfectly. He said, quote, "In exchange for not crashing the United States economy, you get nothing. You don't get a cookie. You don't get to be treated like you're the second coming of LBJ. You're just a person doing the bare minimum of not intentionally screwing over your constituents for insane reasons." Which is exactly right. Like, you don't negotiate with hostage takers because then that tells them that hostage taking is an effective strategy. And these people already think that because it worked with Kevin McCarthy. He's going to put a bill on the floor asking to eliminate the IRS. He's probably going to try and tie that bill to a debt ceiling bill. So the position here has to be making sure that Americans know that Republicans are trying to crater the U.S. economy, and in exchange for trying to crater the U.S. economy, they're also going to try and take your Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid and slap a 30% tax on every single thing sold in America. If you can find what part of that sounds good to you, I'm all ears. So we'll continue to watch this fight play out, but hopefully it's resolved before the 11th hour in June. Hopefully the Democrats can make it clear that we're not going to sacrifice the entire economy so that a few terrorists can traffic in their fever dreams of screwing over the working class. Because it is already clear that Kevin McCarthy and the rest of the Republican Party are perfectly willing to do exactly that. Here's a preview of my interview with Tim Miller. There was a recent vote at the end of the 117th Congress to protect pre-existing same-sex and interracial marriages. A handful of Republican senators voted for it, but about 75% of Republican senators didn't. This was, just until a few years ago, your party. Did this have any effect on you? Like to see that? I mean, that is, for all intents and purposes, like an attack on you. And
you mean as a gay?
As a gay, an attack on you and like the entire LGBT community.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah, I mean, the gay thing is so interesting, right? Because on the one hand, the idea that I like to think back to like 18-year-old young Republican closeted Tim. If you would have told him that like, oh man, 47 Republicans will vote for gay marriage in 15 years, and like you'll be married and have a kid.
Yeah,
I would have been like, that seems pretty good on balance, right? Okay. Yeah. But then fast forward, things have changed so fast, and we've made so much great progress, thanks obviously to Democrats and activists on the left, that now you look at it and it's like a slap in the face, right?
Like the crumbs that you're being given are not.
This is not enough. And you see, to me, that vote, while disappointing, like the number of Republicans that voted for it, is less concerning. Now I come from a different place as a dad than the stuff that is in the schools, right? And you can see like the Republicans basically have ceded this fight on marriage and on the military and some of the big fights of my youth, and now we're saying, okay, well, we're gonna basically reskin the old 1970s and 80s, gay scare, gay teacher scare, for the 2020s. And I think the don't say gay stuff that DeSantis is pushing, like to me, that's the stuff that I'm not gonna be able to abide. And that is, I think, is what is one of the reasons, not all of the reasons, but one of the reasons that makes me different from like a Murphy and some of the others, not to pick on him, right? I hear from some Republicans who are like, wow, well, DeSantis seems like a little better. And I'm like, I don't think, like, I can't get there for DeSantis. Like, maybe you could sell me on a Chris Sununu, but you can't sell me on Ron fucking DeSantis and the don't say gay thing.
Well, that was actually like, I want to get into exactly that point. And that is this idea that basically because Ron DeSantis isn't Donald Trump, that all of his other flaws can be disregarded. But like, this is a guy who's not a moderate by any stretch of the imagination. And in fact, I can promise you that as we see this impending primary fight move forward, we'll see Ron DeSantis like come at Trump from the right.
Right.
And so like, I guess, what do you make of that as we head toward 2024?
He definitely will. And I think that he sees his lane against Trump as attacking him on vaccines, attacking him on the border. You didn't build the wall hard enough. You weren't effective enough. You just generally didn't own the libs as well as you should have, right? Like, I think that's where his hit is on him. So I look at that. To me, there were a lot of reasons. Donald Trump was never even close. I never even contemplated the idea that I might support Donald Trump. There were plenty of reasons. One of the reasons, though, to oppose Trump as a never-Trumper was that just the downside risk of him. He's just such a fucking loose cannon and psychotic, right? Who the hell knows what he could do? That's the only area where DeSantis is better than Trump for me, right? DeSantis is in some ways, it's kind of hard to close your eyes and imagine people waving DeSantis flags and horns and charging the Capitol, right? Like
famous last
words, right?
Yeah.
But it's a little hard. That Trump always had that downside risk, but if you just look at him on a policy, on a policy grid, DeSantis and Trump are going to be indistinguishable.
To listen to my full interview with Tim Miller, click the thumbnail right here on the screen or check out the interviews playlist on my YouTube channel. And always, if you want to see more of my content, don't forget to subscribe.